All right. I think we're gonna go ahead and get started. I know we'll have a few more people that are gonna jump on, and that's great. But we want to go ahead and honor your time. And again, thank you for your patience. But I want to go ahead and introduce to you Allison Boyd. She is our CEO and president of Boyd Grants. And she has over 20 years of grant writing experience, and she is GPC certified in the state of Texas. And she brings a wealth of knowledge to this profession. And so I know that with the information you guys are going to get today, you are going to be blessed and you're going to walk away with so much. And I just hope that you guys get everything that you need from this today. Please know that there will be a question and answer session at the end of the webinar. But if you have any questions during the webinar, feel free to pop them in the chat, and I will make sure that we get those questions over to Allison at the end so that she can answer each and every one of them. So if at any point you feel like, I need to ask a question, just pop it in the chat and we'll make sure that get answered. Also at the end, just wanted to let you know you will receive a copy of the slides and a replay of the webinar so that you can go back over in case you missed something. All of that will be sent to you within 24 or 48 hours of the webinar ending today. So without further ado, Allison, it's all yours.
Well, hi, everyone. Fair warning, my son passed his cold to me, so I will be drinking a lot because I feel like I'm losing my voice. So please forgive me in advance. But today we are going to start and we're going to talk about what is grant writing and really where do you get started. So after our last webinar we put out a little quiz that asked what would you like to learn about in your next topic, and there was an overwhelming response that was tied to I'm really new to the profession, and so I don't know where to get started. So we're going to hit a lot of high level information, and of course there are more opportunities for learning to dig further in, but we're going to talk about what is grant writing all the way to gaining experience through different mentorship programs and things like that, and how to kind of build yourself as a grant professional. So let's start with the basics. What is grant writing? Well, grants are funds that are awarded by governments, foundations, and corporations require a well-crafted proposal. There are several different types of grants, and we're going to walk through each of those. So federal grants are provided by the U.S. government through agencies like Department of Education or FEMA. I feel like FEMA is in the news a lot right now because of all the hurricanes. There's National Science Foundation, Department of Health and Human Services, Homeland Security. There's all these different agencies that do give out different grants along the way. So then there's state grants, and these are administered by state governments, and they may have local priorities. So the states will often get funding from the feds, and the states will give it out to local government, and local government will have their own individual priorities. Sometimes those local government grants are just a conglomerate of applications that go to the state, and then the state packages them and it goes up to the feds as the state application. So there's a lot of different layers in between the different levels of government grants, and that could take its own training session. So the next layer is foundation grants, and those are from private foundations that support specific causes like education, healthcare, the arts, early childhood, learning, different things like that. So I'm sure people have told you, well, you can just get any type of grant from anywhere. Well, I mean, there's a lot of truth in that. However, there's a lot of work that goes into the writing, and each foundation has their specific set of priorities that they choose to fund. Next up is corporate grants, and these are companies that often have a philanthropic arm to support community initiatives. And out of that, is their grant program. So think of things like, someone told me when I first started, and that was so many years ago, just walk down the grocery aisle, and if you find a large corporation, you can go look them up and see if they've got a foundation. Well, that's the long way to do that, but they're not wrong. That's a way to definitely go look for different corporate grants. So more than just what type of grants there are specific key components to each grant proposal. And we can go into complete detail around each of these sections. However, we have a whole nother training that does that, and that one is so intensive and it breaks down each section of it. But we're just gonna do the high level of this, okay? So the key components is the narrative, the budget, and the attachments. The narrative is the story that describes the problem, the solution, and how your organization will address it. In your narrative, you really need to talk about what, how the program that you are seeking funding for aligns with what the funder is looking. And so you're really trying to tell your story of how you guys match. And you're basically a relationship builder. So you are putting a lot of facts and data into your narrative, along with measures that you're going to review and measure along the way. And you're going to weave a story to help the funder know what your organization is trying to solve and how you're going to address it. The budget is a detailed financial plan outlining how the grant funds will be used. So I like to think of the budget as the numbers that tell the same exact story as the narrative. So whatever is in your budget needs to be reflected in your written narrative. And that is so important, because if you put something in your budget that isn't really in your narrative, then where is that money going and how is it tied to your narrative? The next is attachments. Attachments are the supplemental materials, like organizational charts, resumes, or additional financial statements. Attachments, they can be the basic ones that are often requested from foundation funders, or when it comes to government writing, they can be specific to what the entity that you're applying for requests. So we're working with one organization right now, and some of the attachments on there is like a project area map with the census tracts and how those census tracts align under the rural designation. And so there's this whole map you have to cut and paste from and put in and create a narrative around that. But that's the attachment that goes and supports what's in your narrative. So your attachments, just like your budget, should always support what's in your narrative. So that's kind of the high level basics of grant writing. But let's talk about establishing your learning plan. So if you guys are brand new in the grant professional field, there's not a formal like degree plan in grant writing. There is great degree plans that have grant writing as a piece of it, and that's very important. But man, if you're starting as a second career or something like that, you're not really going to go back to school to learn the basics. But what you can do are there amazing courses and workshops offered by organizations like the Grant Professionals Association. The National Grants Management Association has some. Entities like ours, we have our own training program, but I've got some other colleagues that have their own courses. Basically, you want to find courses with the topics of the competence that you need support in. And so I use the word competency because I have my GPC, which is the Grant Professional Certified through the Grant Professional Certification Institute. And in order to get your GPC, you have to make sure that you have these certain competencies that you know and you're tested on. And so anytime I get stuck, I go and I look at, and trust me, 20 years in, you're still going to get stuck, right? We're never going to stop learning. So I go through and I look at what competencies that maybe I'm struggling with this month or something like that. And I go and I find different courses. And sometimes that's just Googling what the competency is. And and finding a course that aligns with that. So United Ways offer different courses, things like that. And there's a plethora of books out there. I love reading, and I will devour a book just for the sake of reading. But when you mix my love of reading with my love of the profession I'm in, finding those books is super helpful. So, what are some books that I started with back in the day? I actually had a dean of English who said to me, Allison, you're not going to be a teacher. You don't want to do journalism. What are you going to do with this degree? And I was like, so there's this thing called grants. And he was like, I have no clue what that is. And so we went through and we learned grant writing for 4 years together through Dr. Bev Browning's Grant Writing for Dummies, and then some other really good books along the way. So there's other ones like The Only Grant Writing Book You'll Ever Need by Ellen Karsh and Arlen Sue Fox. There's different ones out there. But man, getting the basics books are so great because you can go back and forth to them all of the time. Sometimes it's just like you get stuck on writing a budget and you just can't get past what you think the budget should look like, but you know it's not working. There's books around writing budgets, and so you can really find that. Amazon is a great source for me because I have a Kindle and I love to just read online or have Audible books. And so that is something that we often do. There's a lot of Grant Writing for Dummies books out there, or there's just different ones that are very helpful to me, but you're going to have to find the ones that are helpful to you. So in order to do that, you want to explore online resources. There's podcasts. So a couple of friends of mine, they have Heyday Services, and they do a podcast, and it's called Fundraising Heyday. And they talk about all kinds of things in the fundraising genre. So whether it's about a book that they read, or it's something about data exploration, understanding census data, talking to beginner writers, things like that, they are phenomenal at having podcasts that are engaging. And they're not the only one out there. They're just my favorite, and they're kind of ones that I listen to when I go for a run or whatever. So that's a good option. And so find your webinars that you like, find the people that you enjoy learning from, look up some different blogs and podcasts. Most people who have a consulting firm have some type of blog that goes along with it. And it's just kind of best practices, conversations that are happening, and those are great. Grant Professionals Association is a wonderful association that has, if you're a member, you get free access to this, I don't really know what you would call it, but it's like a forum, and it's called Grant Zone. And so like-minded individuals ask questions, like I'm struggling here, any advice. And man, grant people are good people, right? We just really share what our advice is and really how to help guide someone along the way. The next step is familiarize yourself with grant-related terminology. Sometimes I feel like it's alphabet soup in our world. And so you've got RFPs, LOIs, NOFOs, RFQs, all of these things, and the terminology overlaps. And so you're only going to be as good as you can knowing what the terminology that your organization that you're applying to is using. So being familiar with specific terms will help you read and interpret grant announcements effectively. The next piece is identify mentors or networks for guidance. So you never stop learning, right? I have a mentor who I've had for, I think it's been 12 years now, and it's the same one that I specifically go to for certain questions because you never stop learning. But having a mentor really helps you to be able to work through learning and making sure that you are staying on top of trends and you have someone in your corner, right? Grant professionals often work in silos. And so is that ideal? No, but we have to get to the quiet place. We have to be able to write And in order to do that, we get the content that we need and we just plug away, right? So, but man, sometimes it's really good to just phone a friend, and having that friend who is your mentor to be able to answer those questions or to just let you be a sounding board is going to be so helpful in growing yourself as a grant professional. We've talked a lot about joining networks or specific networks. I obviously love Grant Professionals Association because the work that they have done to move our profession forward is just insane, and it makes me so happy to be a part of them. But there are others out there. Your community colleges have different associations. Your local counties might have development professionals groups. That we have one locally that I'm a part of, and those are just great places to ask questions and to learn from your peers. And that is, peer learning is so important. You can learn all the stuff out of a book, right? But sometimes just being able to talk to someone and get honest, real life examples that a colleague is working through can really help you build your writing and make you a stronger writer and a better professional along the way. So what are some practical steps to building grant writing skills? If you haven't gotten started, you kind of want to start by working small. You want to begin working on small grant applications for local organizations or internal projects where the stakes are lower. So if you're already in an organization and you kind of got dug like, hey, you're a good writer, you respond well to emails, maybe you should start writing grants. If there's someone who's been writing them in the past, shadow them. See if you can start working on the smaller grants or the small internal projects along the way that help you understand the language that you're trying to respond with, and really getting and digging deeper into your organization as a whole. Because sometimes if we're just doing grants as other duties as assigned, we don't always think of the organization as a whole. We think of solving the problem in the world that we are immediately in, right? And so grant writers have the special capability to really look and dig into the organization and say, hey, where are we going and what are our strategies and why are we trying to do these things? And so starting small really helps you to build that capacity of understanding your organization, or maybe the organization that you're volunteering with. There are many organizations that would love someone to volunteer for them to write grants and to help them get into the grant world, because maybe they don't have enough funding to pay for an internal grant writer, much less an external grant writer. And so if your goodwill is volunteering, then this is a great way to get your feet wet and to really kind of dig into that. So starting small really helps with building confidence and practicing your writing and making sure it's clear and concise. Learning to read and interpret RFPs is like the most basic requirement for grant writing. So being able to follow instructions is most of grant writing. You've got to be able to know exactly what the funder is wanting to fund and knowing how to respond effectively to those requests for proposals. And a request for a proposal can be super big, and it can be 20 to 50 pages with a lot of content and information, or it can just be a very small, give us 3 pages response of what project you want to get funded. And so part of learning to interpret something as basic as that is you're going to jump to this, understand the importance and alignment between funders' goals and your organization's needs. So sometimes that request for proposal might be a very simple request, but your job is to become a detective, and you've got to dig in and figure out how to align what the funder's goals are with what your organization's goals are, and make sure that you're telling your story. Don't change your story, but you are telling your story in a way that piques the interest of the funder and it meets the requirements of the RFP. So in order to do that, you're going to want to focus on your writing skills by developing clear and concise narratives. And so in order to you're going to want to write persuasively, and your proposal should be easy to read and allow the funders and follow the funders guidelines closely. So how do we do that? How do we make our proposals easy to read, but it's super persuasive and it's got all the data and we're telling the story and we're aligning the funders' goals with our needs and we're doing all of that, but we're being clear and we're helping the reviewer know what we're doing. So a tip from us is really we take the top things that the funder calls out in their RFP. If it's a government application, it's typically under the selection review criteria, and it tells you what they want to fund, like what they are reviewing and the points aligned to it. Or if it's in like a community foundation, it'll say answer these 10 questions, and those questions become our headers. So if it's explain the community demographics and the need, and so we'll make the header demographics and need, and then we'll respond to that effectively. So then the reviewer, as they're checking off their list, can say, hey, they're making sure that they're following what the RFP means. So not only are you going to make it clear for the reviewer, you're also going to use storytelling techniques to describe the need and impact of your project. I feel like back when I first started, I was like, just the facts, people. I want cut and dry. I want to be able to tell the facts. But man, as you really dig into writing, you really are telling a story, and you have to be more compelling than the next person. And so you're going to need to be able to use storytelling techniques to help develop that clear, concise narrative. Just remember that funder alignment is one of the most important factors for a successful grant application. It helps you to know and understand that you've written effectively and that you've aligned your organization's needs with what that funder, with what those funders' goals are. And as a result of that funder alignment, you're going to have a better proposal because you're going to speak the same language as those who you're seeking funding from. Okay, so your next step is going to make sure that you gain experience through practice. We kind of talked about volunteering, and that's so very important. So when I first started, I felt like I had a full-time job that I was doing. Grant writing was other duties as assigned, and it was part of it. But I also had some grants that I would do for local organizations like parent teacher foundations and things like that, that were just like low-hanging fruit, like $500 of a grant or something. But it really helped me to learn how to tell people's stories differently. It gave me a better knowledge of my strengths and weaknesses as a writer. So being able to volunteer with local nonprofits or schools it does two things. It gives you experience through practice, but it also helps build the community in which you live, right? So not every day can you donate hundreds and thousands of dollars, but man, donating your time and effort is just as important as donating money. So anyway, volunteering for grant writing for other organizations is a good and easy way to gain experience through practice. You could possibly intern with established grant professionals or consulting firms. Some firms seek internships or apprenticeships opportunities. Some just really love giving back to the profession and training newbies, right? And teaching people to be better writers. Because if we believe in people who are just now beginning in their career, it's only going to make the grants profession so much better. And you can learn so much from just mirroring and interning underneath someone who has been in the field for a while. And it really helps you to learn the unspoken rules of grant writing, the unspoken rules of organizational development, and all of those things along with it. So where do you find some intern opportunities? Well, LinkedIn is great. I see all different job postings for internships and things like that would align with this work that we do. You're also going to want to collaborate on grant writing teams. And if it's possible, you might want to join, especially, okay, so let me put all my words together correctly. especially if you're working on a government grant, team grant writing is so important, right? There's a lot of moving pieces. And so being able to work on a team, you're able to see which part of that application do you like, and do you have a preference to different parts of the process? Do you like pre-award? Do you like post-award? Do you like the development? Do you like writing logic models? Did you figure out the budgets or where it's at, and you can rock those out in your sleep? So narrative development, all of that, working together on a team can really help you hone and define your skills. We on our team, if we have a writer who wants to flip from foundation work to government work, we'll have them start doing reviews off of our other writers who have written government grants for years, and they'll start doing compliance reviews. So does it meet what the RFP says? And that's how they're reviewing it. And so they're doing two things. They're learning how to review a really good proposal, and then they're also learning how one is written and the cadence and things like that. So working on a team is important. You want to use your existing network. So begin with grants for familiar organizations. Start by helping organizations you already have connections with, such as a local church, school, or nonprofit. So if your son or daughter or whatever, whoever, right, niece, nephew, is on a sports league, well, guess what? They are often looking for funding for different equipment and things like that. So being familiar with the organizations in your community is a great way to have connections and to start that writing process and to get stronger. Look for grants where you can add value, and you're going to do that through offering help with research and finding the right grants for someone. Maybe you know that an organization does grant writing, but you know that their data collection skills are not the best. And so maybe you want to start doing the needs section or the data collection piece. Look for value where you can add your own value in a current process. You don't have to be the only person writing the narrative. You also don't have to be the one to love writing the narrative. You, like we said on the previous slide, you can love different parts of it, and that is perfectly capable. So find people within your existing network who maybe need support in the areas that you love, and start your process by working alongside them. Building a grant portfolio is really important. Mine goes back to 2004. And so that's really when I started keeping a record of all of the grants that I had worked on that were awarded, and even the ones that haven't been awarded. So it's important because you want to track your lessons learned. So after each submission, it's great to reflect on what worked well and what didn't, because not every grant is going to get awarded, and that's okay. Because every grant is a lesson learned. It is also something that you can build off of in the future. The information you put in your grant application can be used for marketing. It can be used for all of those things because you've done all of the work up front. If possible, you want to request feedback from funders to improve your future applications. And you can request feedback from anyone, but you can also do it for those that were not awarded and those that were awarded, because we all know that not every grant that was awarded was perfect 100% of the time. You might have scored really well and you might have gotten all the points, but man, someone reviewed it and there's probably something that you probably could have said a little bit better. So it's nice to see other people's perspective who haven't been in the development of it stage of the writing process. So building a grant portfolio is great because it lets you see where you started and where you're at, and maybe it also shows your strengths and weaknesses too. Okay, so we have quite a few people who do faith-based grant writing, and I just want y'all to realize that there are limitations that come alongside faith-based grant writing. So many government grants have restrictions regarding the use of funds for religious activities. So it's just really essential to be clear on what is eligible. And that goes back to knowing how to read your RFP and making sure that A, your organization is eligible, and B, that the impact that you want to make aligns with the allowable cost. You're going to highlight your community impact over your religious mission. That does not mean that you're getting rid of your religious mission by any means, but when you're applying for a secular grant, you want to focus on the social or community impact of the faith-based organization's work. So if you are a church and you are looking for funding for your food pantry, then you're focusing on hunger. The impact is hunger relief. And so what is this faith-based organization doing to solve hunger in your area? If you are a private school, a private Christian school, you're going to focus on education and the impact of that work. So maybe you need a library, maybe you need a STEM learning lab, maybe you need a new playground equipment. You're going to, whatever that looks like, you're going to focus on the impact of the work that you do. And we can go on for days on how that aligns. You can also look for grants specifically focused on faith-based initiatives. They're out there. You just have to be able to research and find the foundations and grant makers that specifically support religious organizations. So we work with 2 religious organizations right now, I believe. And some of the funders that we are pulling for them align exactly with their faith and are all about the faith-based component. But then some of the funders are just like, what are you doing for school? What are you teaching your kids? How are you educating them? What is that need? So we're able to tailor it both ways based on the research that we find. Okay, so let's jump into crafting up the proposal. You're going to want to focus on inclusive language, and that language is going to be what emphasizes your community impact. And you're going to, if it's for a religious, if it's a religious organization, you're going to avoid overly religious language unless you're applying to a faith-based funder. Demonstrating your broader community impact is really going to help you along the way. It's going to highlight how the project will serve not just your congregation, but the wider community. Broader community impact is so important long-term anyway, because when you're looking at goals and objectives, that's what you're measuring, is how does the work that I do impact the greater community. You also want to highlight partnerships and collaborations within the community. So showcase your partnerships with other local organizations and how do you demonstrate and reach capacity together. And so a partnership and a collaboration is not a referral service. So a partnership is 2 organizations, 2 like-minded organizations doing similar things, but they're doing it alongside each other, and how this program feeds into this other partner's program, and they help the same individual get to the goal, but they might do it 2 different ways. And so you're a partner, you're not a referral. So what are some key resources for finding grants? Well, there's online databases such as grants.gov for federal grants, Foundation Directory Online for private foundation grants, and GrantStation is a paid resource that lists different grant opportunities. However, if you are a member of the Grant Professionals Association, GrantStation is a part of your membership. So for my team, we use all of these. We use Foundation Directory Online, we use grants.gov, we use GrantStation. We use free, paid, whatever we can get our hands on to help streamline our research and finding the right prospects. Okay, so government websites. You're going to visit your state and local government websites for funding opportunities that may be more accessible for smaller organizations. So like in Houston, in the Houston area, the city of Houston, Harris County, they all use Bonfire. And so they post their grant applications on Bonfire. And so that's one of our researches that we use. We go to Texas government land office, and we look for their funding searches from there. So we really dig into the state that we're working with and find their own different portals for different grants that they post to. So you kind of become a little bit of a detective. So identifying funders that align with your organization's mission. Part of research is really digging into funders whose priorities align with your organization's mission. You're going to focus on those that have a track record of funding similar projects, and you're going to want to dig more than just who they funded in the last year. You really want to look at who they've funded in the last 3 years, because it establishes a pattern. Targeting the right grants. Understanding the funder's priorities. By looking at past projects they funded to understand their preferences is going to let you have a competitive application. Sometimes you'll see that the funder's priorities on their website and the priorities from the who they've funded in their 990s that you see don't always align. And so that's why we like to look at the past 3 years. We also coach our clients to call the funder and reach out and say, hey, this is on paper, it looks like we match. But do we really? And we actually have one funder tell a client that was like, yeah, on paper you match, but in the past 6 months, we've changed our priorities internally. And so while everything that we've done, the research said it was a perfect fit, but conversation said we haven't updated everything and you don't necessarily fit. So targeting the right grants and understanding the funder's priorities is more than looking at paper. You've really got to get to know your funder, and you need to build that relationship. You're also going to want to review eligibility criteria carefully. Always make sure your organization qualifies before applying. Man, nothing wastes more time than working on a grant that you're ineligible for. And sometimes you just don't realize that you're ineligible because you think you meet the criteria, but man, when it gets to the online portal and you end up having to go through the initial quiz and it kicks you out because there's an unknown eligibility section, that's a good place to start. Start with the portals before you really start your writing. Because once again, sometimes what's on paper and shows that you match doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to align according to how you dig deeper. Look for smaller local foundation grants as a starting point. You kind of want to build your writing, right? So going in writing for $100,000 grant is great. And man, I hope you get it. And I hope that you are a stellar writer and that you're fully capable of doing that. However, if you're not confident for writing for that, then I would start small. I mean, my first grant I wrote was for $2,500 to do a free camp for a week for underserved kids. And it didn't cover all of the expenses, but that's what we wrote for, and that's what we got awarded for. And every year afterwards, we would add like $1,000 to that. And man, every year I had to write stronger and stronger in order to justify that additional need. And so if you really want to build your writing capabilities, then do it that way. I mean, by all means, jumping right in if you want to. But starting small is a good place to start too. Expand your prospect list through networking. So sometimes we feel like as grant professionals, networking isn't going to work for us. Well, that's not necessarily true, because many nonprofits attend networking events that are put on by like Grant Professionals Association, National Grants Management Association, local development groups, things like that. But they have funders that come in. So nonprofits are going to associate with funders and vice versa. And guess what? Networking is great, because what did we say early on? That grants is not completely just about writing. It's about building relationships. And so you're not going to network to browbeat someone over learning about your foundation, your organization while you talk to a funder. No, you are just really trying to get your foot in the door and to meet that funder where they're at and tell them a little bit about you and humanize yourself and make sure that you're building relationships along the way. Sorry. You're going to want to join grant-related LinkedIn groups or professional organizations. Platforms like these connect other grant professionals together And joining relevant groups helps you to stay informed of upcoming opportunities. Last night I was on LinkedIn and I found out, and I'm on like all these different newsletters and things like that funders are supposed to send out. But man, on LinkedIn, someone announced an award extension before I ever got a newsletter saying that it was being extended. I got the newsletter this morning, but someone announced it on LinkedIn last night. And I texted my client, I was like, did you see this? This is amazing. And we were able to just know in advance. So staying connected in that way is really going to help you build your capacity for knowing your funders. Staying patient and persistent is super important as you begin your career, because you have to understand that the first grant that you write may not be successful. It's a competitive field, and it's normal not to win your first few applications. It's normal not to win every application. Success comes with time, practice, and refining your approach. Like any skill, grant writing improves with practice, and being patient and keep refining your approach is going to help you be a better writer long term. How to build strong funder relationships. I've kind of talked about this on and off, but man, communicating with program officers to understand their priorities is so important. And remember, it's not just what you see on paper. There are people who wrote what is on paper. And so really getting to know and building a relationship is so important. So we don't want to treat our funders like an ATM. So follow up after submission and asking for feedback is great. Acknowledging and thanking them for reviewing your proposal, whether you won or not, is a great way to build strong relationships. And you want to maintain regular contact with funders, even when you're not actively applying, because then they're not forgetting about you. You're not being annoying, but you're just, hey, I just wanted to let you know, we don't have funding with you right now, but man, we started this great new program and we're excited to share it. Because what does that do? It keeps you relevant in their mind. Okay, this is our last slide, and then we're going to jump into Q&A. So organization is key. So how do you keep track of everything? We have many clients all throughout the year. So we keep a lot of track for them, but if you're not a part of a firm, or you're just a one-man team, or inside a big organization, whatever that looks like, having a grants calendar to track your internal and external deadlines is going to keep you sane. So whether or not the grant is due on a rolling deadlines are great, but they're also tied to when the board of directors meets. So it might be rolling, but what you might want to align your submissions to when their meetings are. And so being able to put that on a calendar helps you to see that quickly. I know people who literally use their they have one Google Calendar that is actually their grants calendar, and it's got every deadline that they need for the year on there, their internal deadline for it, their external deadline, and their follow-up deadline. And that works for them. I have other friends who use Excel as a management system for reviewing and making sure they're on track for all of their grants and reporting requirements. We use a project management system called Asana. We don't use it to necessarily get into the nitty gritty of every application, but we use it as an internal Boyd grants mechanism to keep track of all of our clients and their internal deadlines and who's working on what project. There are many free programs out there. There are many paid programs out there, but the basic spreadsheet works too. I have a friend who lives and dies by her whiteboard in her office, and it is a huge whiteboard, and she's got every grant for the next year and what their deadlines are and when she needs to start working on it. So do what works for you, but staying organized is what's going to keep you sane in this whole process. Okay, so we're going to jump into the Q&A session. I'm going to flip it back to Melissa because she can see any questions that are posted. So she'll ask the questions and I'll answer them if that works for everyone. And then we will wrap it up and hope to hear from y'all soon.
Okay, so let me just go back and look through the comments. Let's see, I actually don't see any questions in the comments. So if you guys have any that you want to just ask, just feel free to unmute yourself and the floor is yours. You're welcome to just ask any questions that you have and Allison will answer them. So Paulette just commented that having a pre-eligibility quiz makes a lot of sense.
It does. And it sneaks up on you on some of the things that they tag as ineligible, or there might be a deeper demographic area or whatever that they decide is important as opposed to what's put on their 990. So it's really good to go through that first. Any other questions? Otherwise, we'll just start wrapping up.
Here's some additional webinars that are coming up. We have one in November for tips for prospect research. In December, how to beat writer's block. In January, program grants versus operating support. And in February, communication solutions. And as always, feel free to reach out to us by email, info@boydgrants.com. You can always follow us on LinkedIn. Check out boydgrantsacademy.com where you can find all of our courses as well as resources that you can download. We have both free courses and paid courses, free resources and paid resources. And please join our newsletter for all kind of information and updates about things that are happening with Boyd Grants. And then as a thank you for attending the webinar, you will receive a download that's going to be sent to you. It's called 10 Tips for Grant Writing. And it's just going to give you the top 10 tips that Allison has used to help her in her grant writing, and just an explanation of each one of those tips that goes along with that. And we'll send that out to you on the email that follows this webinar in a day or two.
Melissa, are there any other questions while you were chatting?
I have not seen any come in, but as I'm watching the live view, it looks like we're still on a little bit of a delay. So there's still a few slides back. So we'll give it just another minute or two. All right, I think what we're going to do, since we are on a little bit of a delay and instead of we're getting close to the ending time, if you guys do have questions, please send them to us through email and we will make sure to get those questions answered to you. But what we don't want to do is just to sit and wait for this delay, and we don't want to waste your time. And that's the biggest thing. We want to make sure that we're honoring your time. So we want to thank you for attending the webinar today. Again, any questions, any comments that you have, please reach out to us. Allison, can you go back to the slide that has our email address? There's the email, info@boydgrants.com. That email goes both to me and to Allison, and we will make sure that we get all of your questions answered and sent back out to you. And just as a reminder, a copy of this webinar and the slides and the download will be sent out to you guys as soon as possible, 24 to 48 hours. And we're just so grateful that you guys joined us today. We'll send that 10 tips for grant writing out to you. And we look forward to seeing all of you on the next webinar. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you soon. Bye.